They expected the fire to burn out in a week. 54 years later, it is still burning. The hole is 60 meters across and 30 meters deep, and it sits in the middle of a desert with no road sign pointing to it. Anyone who travels there has to know it is there before they leave the city. The drive from the capital takes about 4 hours, on a road that is at first paved, then asphalt, then a track of compacted sand. The hole appears suddenly. There is a low rim of broken earth, and beyond the rim, the air begins to roll with heat. Then the visitor sees what is inside. Not a single flame, but hundreds of them, scattered across the floor and the inner walls, each burning with its own clean flickering tongue, all of them together producing a sound that the only person ever to have descended into the crater described as the roar of a jet engine. The crater has a name in the local language. It is called Karakum Yalkami, the Shining of Karakum. The official tourist literature in the country where it sits, Turkmenistan, is required by the government to call it that. The rest of the world calls it the door to hell. This is the story of an industrial mistake that no one has been able to undo, of a desert town that became one of the most photographed places on Earth without ever appearing on a road map, and of a fire that was set by Soviet engineers in the year of decimal currency in Britain, the breakup of the Beatles, and the introduction of the floppy disk, and that has burned, at the same coordinates in the Karakum Desert, every day and night since then. The early history of the crater is, by official admission, lost. The records, if they were ever kept, are either missing, classified, or held by Soviet-era archives in Moscow that have never been opened. Two competing accounts have circulated among local geologists for decades. In the first account, the standard version told to journalists, a team of Soviet engineers drilling for natural gas in 1971 struck a large underground cavern. The drilling rig collapsed into the cavern within days, leaving a circular crater on the surface. To prevent the escape of methane and the heavier hydrogen sulfide gas that began to seep out, the engineers chose to set the gas alight, expecting it to burn off the available fuel within a week or two. They underestimated the volume of the gas. The cavern beneath them was not a pocket. It was the surface evidence of one of the largest natural gas fields on Earth. In the second account, told quietly by older Turkmen geologists to interviews from National Geographic and the BBC, the cavern collapsed sometime in the 1960s, and the crater was not set alight until the early 1980s. The longer the gap between the collapse and the ignition, the longer the gas had to accumulate underground, and the more difficult, in either telling, the fire would be to put out. Both accounts agree on the conclusion. The fire was set on purpose. The men who set it expected it to burn out within days. It has burned, without interruption, for more than half a century. For the next 40 years, the crater was almost a secret. Turkmenistan is one of the most closed countries in the world. Travel into the country requires a visa that the government often declines to grant. The crater sits in a desert that, for most of the Soviet period, was a restricted military and industrial zone. Foreign journalists were not welcome. The Karakum Desert is the size of Germany, and the crater, in the middle of it, was simply not a destination that one ended up at by accident. Then, in 2010, the president of Turkmenistan, a man named Gabonguli Berdimuhamedov, announced that he wished the crater to be closed. The reason given was that the burning was interfering with the development of nearby gas fields, all of which the state controlled. A study would be commissioned. The crater would be sealed. It was not sealed. In 2013, a Canadian explorer named George Kourounis became the first human being to set foot on the floor of the crater. He was lowered in on a custom Kevlar harness, wearing an aluminized heat-proof suit and a self-contained breathing apparatus, gathering soil samples for a study called the Extreme Microbiome Project, which was searching for organisms that could survive at the limits of life on Earth. The descent was sponsored by National Geographic. Kourounis later described what he saw in the bottom of the crater as a coliseum of fire. The flames came not from a single vent, but from thousands of small openings in the rock. The sound, he said, was the steady high-pressure roar of a jet engine. There was no smoke. The methane burned cleanly. He could see every flame in front of him as if he were standing inside a furnace open to the night sky. He went down with a question. He came up with one answer and 100 more questions. The microbes recovered from the soil at the bottom of the crater were, in some cases, of species not previously catalogued. They had been living in conditions of intense heat, in the absence of light, with the constant noise of combustion above them, for most of human living memory. The fire was killing nothing in the soil that was not already dead. The earth had simply absorbed the wound and gone on. In 2019, the president of Turkmenistan returned to the rim of the crater. International rumors had been circulating that he had died. To disprove them, he drove a rally truck around the burning hole, on state television, and performed a series of donut stunts in the dust by the rim, with the orange light of the crater rising behind him. The footage was broadcast inside the country with national pride. Outside the country, it was watched as comedy. In January of 2022, the president announced again, more formally, that the crater would be closed. He cited the loss of natural gas to the atmosphere, the damage to local health, and the harm done to the country's gas industry. A commission was established to identify the optimal extinguishing technique. Wells were drilled around the perimeter of the crater to capture methane that might be diverted to commercial use, depriving the central fire of fuel. For the first time in 50 years, the fire began to retreat. By June of 2025, French wire reports stated that the visible flames had been reduced threefold. By August of the same year, what had once been a coliseum of fire had become only a few isolated pockets, scattered across the floor of the crater. By the spring of this year, infrared analysis by an American company that monitors gas flares from space found that the heat output of the fire had fallen by more than 3/4 in only 3 years. The door to hell is going out. It is not, however, going quietly. The same satellite analysis that found the flames diminished found something else. The methane emerging from the crater had not stopped. It had increased. In late 2025, the crater was venting almost 2,000 kilograms of methane an hour, more than at any point measured in the previous 3 years. The flame had been the lid on the wound. With the lid lifted, the gas was simply escaping, unburned, into the atmosphere over the desert. Methane is a potent greenhouse gas. The unburned tonnage now leaving the crater every day, multiplied across the year, contributes to a national emissions figure that already places Turkmenistan, by some measures, at the very top of the global league table for atmospheric methane release. The fire that the engineers lit in the 1970s had, in addition to all of its other effects, been doing something useful. It had been converting one of the most damaging greenhouse gases on the planet into one of the less damaging ones. As the fire goes out, the conversion stops. The hole continues to breathe. In an earlier episode of Hollow Signal, episode 7, I told the story of an Italian dam that the engineers who built it knew would be overtopped by the mountain above it, and that they filled with water anyway. The Vajont Dam was an act of institutional optimism in the face of evidence. The door to hell, by every available account, was an act of the same kind. The fire was lit because the men who lit it believed it would solve a problem in a few days. The fire was kept burning because no one in any government in 2 generations had been able to think of a way to put it out. And now that the fire is finally being put out, in the most thorough effort in the crater's history, it turns out that putting it out was the wrong move all along, because the gas keeps coming, and there is nothing left at the surface to consume it. There is a thread that runs through the whole of this story. It is not, finally, about Turkmenistan, or about the Soviet engineers, or about the rally truck on the rim. It is about the assumption, which human beings make again and again, that an action large enough to set fire to a piece of the world is a complete decision. The decision to set the fire is one decision. The decision about what happens when the fire goes out is another. The men who lit the gas crater in the Karakum did not make the second decision, because they expected to be back at the office the following week. A driver who knows where to look can still find the place. There is no road sign. The track from the highway is unmarked. At the end of the track, there is a low rim of broken earth, and beyond the rim, the air still rolls with heat, but less of it now, and the color of the night above the crater is no longer the orange of an open furnace. It is becoming, by slow degrees, the color of the night sky. If this story stayed with you, subscribe. I cover the cases the world forgot.